And thank you very much for having me here. It, in fact, is a great honor to address you today. I love Istanbul. I got here Saturday, and I've spent the last few days walking the city and taking in all that's here. And it's an amazing place. It's where old meets new, east meets west, and clearly a place where the past is meeting the future. And that's essentially what I want to talk about today, is the idea that we are at a crossroads in how all of us are going to work together. And my presentation really is about work, how we're going to work together over the next few years, with a specific emphasis on Turkey. Now, I have to tell you, I may find myself sitting down at some point in time. I have new shoes, they're very beautiful. And all the walking the last few days has made my feet hurt, so a combination of feet hurting and new shoes is causing me a little bit of discomfort. So if I look like I'm moving gingerly, I am. Okay, so the session that I'm going to talk about is drawn upon all of the expertise that Forrester has. We have a booth out here, so come and visit us. And that expertise derives from three things. First off, as a company, Forrester knows more about customers than any other organization on the planet. We field an enormous number of surveys out to people who are online, buying things, studying their behaviors, discovering their tendencies, and all of that is available in what we call our consumer technographics data, which you can talk to folks out here at the booth. I'm going to show you some of the highlights of that consumer technographics data in my presentation this morning. The second source of information is we have some of the world's foremost experts on what it means to work with customers from a sales enablement and marketing and servicing standpoint. And I'm going to stand upon the shoulders of those giants as I talk about social business. And then finally, as you probably know, Forrester is second to none in understanding the role that technology plays in society as well as in business. So I'm going to bring all three of those things together as I talk about social business, focusing on the customer context. Because again, the emphasis that I'm bringing to this session is on the idea that social is great for meeting, staying in touch. It's great to act from a consumer standpoint, to learn about different products, but it's increasingly central to how we're going to work together. So all of the skills and knowledge that we've gained over the past few years of thinking about buying online or socializing online is now being applied to how we think about conducting business overall. Now, it's very, very important that we not confuse simple social interactions with business. What I am not going to do is I am not going to tell you this morning that social business is Facebook for the enterprise. That's not what we're talking about. What we're really talking about is three things. First off, we are in the midst of a dramatic shift in how we should all consider the role that we play in conducting business. We call it the age of the customer. I'll explain what I mean by that. Secondly, the age of the customer fundamentally states that customers have more market power, more ability to set terms, to set prices than ever before. And the only way that we're going to put together the communities necessary to conduct complex work is if we find ways to engage those customers through the social venues in which they live and perform their lives. The third thing I want to say is that while it may seem that this is something that perhaps we might say is happening in the United States or in some other country that has a long history of using mainframe technology in big applications, the reality is Turkey is as ready as any country in the world for doing this. And I'll show you some data that suggests that. So this notion of social business is not something that's happening elsewhere, it's something that's happening right here as well. So let's talk about this age of the customer to get going. What is the age of the customer? Well, if you look at this slide, it's the idea that for most of the past well, forever, quite frankly. When a customer stood and considered their options, the options were pretty much provided by sellers. Most of the doors that they could walk through were doors that were controlled by companies who sold them something. The sources of information, the sources of comparison, what a product was, how it did things. We, for years, talked about the idea of push marketing, where companies created a sense of urgency, created a sense of need. They led the customer around. Well, something's happened in literally the last 5 to 10 years. And it's in many respects why we're here. And that something is the emergence of the internet and the web, and specifically social technologies that allowed customers to engage each other directly. Can we quantify that? Well, in the US, 5,300 billion impressions about brands were presented to consumers. 5.3 trillion impressions. That is a 5-fold increase in the last 5 years. 5 times as many discussions, conversations, points being made about brands today than 5 years ago. Who's the source of those new impressions? It's not the brands themselves. It's customers talking to customers. That's the essence of social business. In the US, more than 4 trillion conversations went on about customers talking to customers in the US alone. 80% of those conversations, 80% of those impressions generated by consumers. That's what we mean by the age of the customer. Today, when a customer looks at the set of options available to them, what do they see? They see 4 out of the 5 conversations that they could enter into being conversations with people like themselves. People that shared their interests. People that have already made the decision. People that are also considering the decision. This is a radical change in how we do business. Now, to give you one more quick data point on this before we move on, we've done research at Forrester that suggests that in the B2B world, the business-to-business world, the world of businesses selling to business, that it is not uncommon, and in some key markets, nearly 70% of the customer's journey is done before they even contact the companies that they may buy from. 70%. Think about it. If you're selling to another business, there's a good chance that 70% of the decisions about who that company, who that customer is going to do business with has already been made before they even contact you. Unprecedented. Never happened like this before. Changes everything. So when we define what the age of the customer and what it means to win in the age of the customer, first off, we define the age of the customer in this way. And I'll read it to you. A 20-year business cycle in which a company's main strengths or main competitive strengths come from investments in every part of their business. Not just the web part or not just the marketing content part, every part of their business designed to systematically understand and engage customers. It's because of that new power that customers have. Now, how do you win? If this is what we all face, how do you win? You win by finding ways to ensure that customers engage you in their moment of need. That's what it's going to mean to win. Get customers to engage you as they identify a need for help. So how are we going to do that? That's the whole point behind social business, is to use social technologies so that it's possible for a customer, when they have a moment of need, to be able to find the expert or the source of value that they can rely on quickly and with great certainty so that their problem gets solved. And what is occurring today is that employees are using their social networks to cut the distance between customers and the value that the company has to offer. That's what we mean by social business. The idea that we can use these ways of connecting, sustaining connections, sharing insights and information to shorten and cut the distance between a customer's need and the value that we can deliver to serve that customer need. I'll give you a very simple example of that. Forrester Research, one of the things that we do is we write a lot of research and we publish a lot of data, but we give our customers an opportunity to call our analysts and ask us questions. We do it very well. A couple of years ago, when a customer called us, it took a certain amount of time for us to be able to schedule that inquiry, as we call it, with the analyst. In the last year, we've cut that time down by 70%. 70%! And we were good at it before. 70% less time for a customer of Forrester to get to the source of value at Forrester because we started applying these techniques and these technologies. That's the type of thing that we're doing at Forrester, but it's also the type of thing that we think all businesses are going to do. Let's give an example here. I'm sure many of you, certainly that have been in sales, have experienced this, and if not, if you've been a customer, you've probably experienced this as well. A salesperson comes to a customer and says, let's make a deal. The customer says, I love the product, it's what I want, I've done my searching around various social venues, and yes, if you can give this to me at this price, I'll do it. And the salesperson says, well, I have to think about that. Let me get back to you. And what happens? The salesperson goes back and they try to get the price request change approved, then they get in touch with accounting to make sure that it works, and then they pass the proper price, the final price, back to accounting. And typically what happens is we use a formal process to do that, where the salesperson is responsible for constructing a document and routing a document to a deal desk and all the other things, and eventually some authority, some approval comes back. And as I said, this can take days, weeks, sometimes even months. Meanwhile, the customer who had their moment of need is now off to doing something else. What we're seeing happen is through this social business, the ability to quickly identify expertise within the business that can make that decision faster, that can facilitate and speed the decision so that the customer is made even happier than they otherwise would have been if they had just bought the product. That's what we're talking about. And as a consequence, companies today are investing heavily in the technologies to do this. So if you take a look at this data basically shows for those software decision makers what will be some of the top priorities here in 2013. And if you look at it, it basically shows that roughly 60% of software decision makers list increased collaboration software on this backbone of social technologies as either a critical or high priority. Now again, you may look at this data and you say, yeah, but that doesn't really characterize us. Well, here's the other thing that's happening. Here's why social business is going to change everything. Literally, if you go back 10 years, this is the way that companies competed with each other. You had a small number of individuals who had the technical expertise to invent something new. Those small number of people had access to enormous dollars because the tools necessary to invent something new were very expensive. And as a consequence, we got a a limited number of big ideas out into the marketplace. And we got very excited about it. What's happening today? Because so much of the new value is taking a digital form, which allows global incorporation of talent. Now we've got lots of individuals who are capable of inventing something new, using digital tools that are much less expensive. And as a consequence, we're getting an enormous number of ideas. So let's put some conservative numbers on this. 100 times the innovators at 1/100th of the cost. We can at least be certain that the likelihood that any of our businesses are going to be disrupted is 10,000 times higher than it was just 5 years ago. So everything that I'm talking about is real, and it's happening, and we can't discount it. And Turkey's ready. Couple points here. Let's take a look at the Turkish online adults and what they're doing with social media. When you see this, you'll see that we have the overall adult population, males and females. First off, Turkish adults, you, are posting texts or media. You're liking something that someone has posted. You're commenting a lot. 3/4 of you do this. Well, probably all of you, but 3/4 of those folks living in Turkey are doing this if they're online. They're connecting. They are working together. They are making things happen together. And they're also working with companies in the same type of proportions. So if you are in a company that wants to engage socially, your customers here in Turkey already have adopted that behavior. What types of things are they doing? Well, 77% are buying online, browsing or buying, 19% are just browsing and then going somewhere else to buy, and only 4% of the folks online say that they're not doing any of these things. As a consequence, the types of numbers from a commerce standpoint that we see happening here in Europe are enormous, up to 175 billion euro by 2016. It's a big number, and it's only going to get bigger. What are they buying? Everything. Computers and peripherals, clothing, accessories, music, a lot of digital products, but not only digital products. The entire economy is increasingly being tooled to facilitate customers getting access to the goods and services that they want online. That's why social business is happening now, and that's why it's so important that we take it seriously everywhere, including here in Turkey. So as I leave you with a couple of thoughts for the remainder of the conference, first off, customers are demanding better service. You're demanding better service, and you're going to get it because of this age of the customer notion. Secondly, social business is so exciting because it does collapse the distance between customers and a business's valuable resources. It's happening everywhere in the world. It's only going to accelerate, but it's also happening, and perhaps even especially happening, here in Turkey. And with that, I'd like to invite you to come visit the Forrester booth. I hope to meet more of you in the future, and please enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you very much for having me here in this beautiful city.